Welcome to this week's Piano with Ease YouTube video. I'm Natalie Brynne. I've been a piano teacher for over 22 years, and now I'm the creator of Piano with Ease, which helps busy adults play a large collection of songs in a fraction of the time that it can take in traditional piano lessons, because they don't have to learn how to read sheet music first before they can play anything. In this week's video, I'm going to be sharing why I refuse to use these falling notes tutorials that are all over YouTube to teach my students songs in my private studio. If you've never seen one of these tutorials, basically a note is falling while you can hear the song playing, and when it touches the key lights up. People then find those same keys on their piano and they try to play it at the same time that the key is lighting up, as in these demonstrations here. First, you may have heard me say in other videos that I believe there are many paths up the mountain to learning how to play piano. I definitely don't want to come across snobby, like I'm saying that this isn't a good way for someone to learn. Somebody might really be excited about this particular way to learn piano, and if that's you, isn't it awesome that there are so many options to learn piano nowadays with the internet being in everyone's home? In fact, it's crazy to think that it's only about 100 years ago when people started to have the privilege of listening to music in their home by having a radio. Before that, you had to know how to play an instrument or sing to have music in your home, or you had to be able to go to concerts to enjoy music. And about 200 years ago, only the very rich could even afford to learn how to play piano. So nowadays it's pretty cool. This dates me, but when I was a kid trying to learn how to play songs on the piano, I would get a cassette player, put it right by the piano, I would listen, pause it, and then I would try and find the similar note on my piano, and once I found it, I would write it down on my manuscript paper. Very time-consuming compared to the options nowadays. But I digress. Back to the subject. Basically, just because there are these awesome ways to learn piano nowadays doesn't necessarily mean that they all work in a studio setting where a teacher is expected to build skills in a student. I had many students come to lessons all excited about a new song they found on YouTube, asking me if I would please teach them the song using these tutorials. I hated disappointing them, but I would decline, and instead I would try and find sheet music to the same song for them. It was always a priority to me that my students be able to play songs they were enjoying, and sometimes we couldn't find the sheet music to the song they wanted, but the cons still outweighed the pros for me in trying to use the falling notes tutorials. I'll share those shortly, but I do want to first say there are some pros to this way of learning piano. When somebody's playing along with this, they can actually see how long to hold a note, which means they're playing the correct rhythm of the song. This helps them avoid playing the completely wrong rhythm and getting it in their head and playing the song in an unrecognizable way. Another pro is that a student didn't have to learn how to read traditional sheet music first, which can be so time-consuming. It can take years, and they can literally have a quick win, especially if a tutorial like this is a very easy song. But as a piano teacher, it's my job to help students build skills that build upon each other and lead to overall success in being able to play several songs. My goal was always that they would have a few things ready to play if somebody came up to them and said, "Oh, you're taking piano lessons, can you play me something?" If they didn't feel like they had something to play right away like that, then what is the point of piano lessons? So that leads me to my first point of why I do not use these to teach students, because in my experience, this way of learning doesn't stick. And I don't want to spend my time helping my students learn something that they are almost guaranteed to forget. I learned this the hard way because when these tutorials first came out, I did agree to teach a couple students songs this way. It was actually really hard to teach this way. It was hard to zero in on a specific point in the song to make it better. It was hard to find exactly where we wanted to go. You can't see the music as a whole like you can with sheet music. On sheet music, you can go right to a specific point in a song and slow it down. This is pretty clunky to try and slow it down or get it right to where we needed to start from. We kept having to find timestamps and have lots and lots of repetition of a particular spot. So basically, after tons of time was put into it, over many lessons, the student could finally play it. They were so excited. They seemed happy. But I realized later that a few months down the road, if they didn't keep this up, it just went bye-bye. When they tried to play it again, they were so discouraged. I watched their faces fall because they couldn't remember what to do. A lot of them didn't even try to play the songs again because they knew it was going to be work to have to focus in so hard and watch all the notes fall and hit the piano keys and remind themselves what they did again. There wasn't an easy way to remember notes or the specific finger they used on each note. This way of learning had relied heavily on memorization and muscle memory, and once they started learning other songs and playing other patterns, it got mixed up and they had a hard time remembering the patterns that they used. I hated that they had nothing to show for all that time and lessons. I saw this happen with my 2 older sons when they were in high school too. They just didn't want to take the time to get out the sheet music and learn how to play a song. So they learned several songs like this, and they told me the same things too. My son said, "It sucks that I could play the song perfectly and now I can't remember how to do anything on it." So unless you're one of those few people who can learn something and memorize it really quick and it just lives there, then I would not recommend this way of learning songs, unless you don't really care if you forget it after you play it. The next main reason why I didn't like to teach using these is because you couldn't easily assign a finger number to each note. And so oftentimes students were just using whatever finger happened to be kind of by that key. But when you're always changing fingering and you don't commit to one, then brain always has to put some energy to thinking, now which finger am I going to use to grab this note? So you can't get mastery over it because you're not doing the same thing over and over and over. The next thing I felt like was a con on these type of songs was as you play faster and faster songs, then it starts to become a lot more difficult to be able to get all these fast notes. You have to slow down the video. You have to do it so many times to be able to play it at the right speed as these colored notes are hitting the keys. So I just feel like if you're going to spend that much time on a song anyway, why not just get the sheet music, even if you spend the same amount of time writing letter names above the notes to make it really easy for you to know exactly what note to go to. And even if you put like your fingering on top of every note, then when you play it, at least you'll know exactly what fingering you're committing to. And over time, that kind of does build your note reading skills because your brain is having to look at the music, even if you did write little hints on it. So why not go the path that kind of teaches you a little more that you can take with you towards your next song? As a teenager, I had a little break between teachers and I taught myself a lot of songs and I spent a lot of time writing letter names above the notes. But over time, I got good at reading the notes and didn't have to do that anymore. So you can teach yourself skills that build that way. The next downside to these type of tutorials is I don't feel like they work good for every age. Like some of my adults, especially when they didn't grow up, like learning tech from the time they were a toddler, sometimes this looks overwhelming and it looks hard to be able to look down and up so much to know exactly what to play. So different solutions for different brains. And the final con is, unless you're one of those super good memorizers that I mentioned before, it's hard for a person to be so focused on what to play. It's more like a video game where they're just focused on playing the right note for the right amount of time. And it's hard to listen to how they're sounding and really think about whether they're being musical or not, because it's kind of pressure that you have to keep up with what's coming instead of really focusing and listening to yourself and making your song as beautiful and as connected as you can. And that can sometimes lead to your playing sounding a little robotic or expressionless. So in summary, the reasons I don't like to use these in my studio is it doesn't seem to stick in my experience. It's hard to use a consistent fingering. It's time intensive, and that same time could be put towards better skills. It's overwhelming for certain students, and it's really hard to focus on hearing how you're sounding if you're sounding musical. But again, if it's a way you love, then go for it. All that said, learning traditional sheet music sometimes doesn't stick for people too, unless they've had years of practice and a lot of consistency, dedicated consistency. So that is why I created the Piano with Ease sheet music that has special visuals to help you get in and be able to play immediately without having to memorize so many concepts. So if you've never tried a song the Piano with Ease style, check the description. There's one you can try today for free. And thank you so much for watching.